of all the poor things I used to do. I don't do no more, for the Lord's made a change in me.
Hello, this is Melissa. It's Real History, and today is Thursday, June the 15th. And I am talking today with David from Ontario, Canada. Hi, David.
Hi, Melissa. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? We had a little rocky start here.
Hilarious. Ghosts in the machine and all that.
Yeah, it happens. So just now, before we launch into things, I mentioned that I could hear the birds in the background, and you said that, yes, you could hear them through your studio. So where are you located?
We're just south of Georgian Bay in a valley. So we're on the Niagara Escarpment.
Mm.
And so it's a UNESCO, protected biosphere, which, as we know, is a double-edged sword. So in any case, we've got a lot of birds and foxes and raccoons and deer and coyote and mink and pretty much anything you can name that is in this region we have.
How does that affect you living in the biosphere? Are there some rules and regulations that you contend with, or?
It's almost, it is occasionally comedic and frustrating. We've built a bunch of little buildings on our property, a sauna, which for people that don't know, any Finnish people, is the correct pronunciation of sauna. It's sauna.
I learned that years ago from someone. I said sauna, and they said it's a sauna.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah.
And we've built a little guest bunkie, and both of them, have to not have a permit, you have to do it, I think it's 10 by 10 or something is the ultimate square footage you can do, and then you have to build it on supports off the ground, so in like sonotubes or something like that. Yeah, it can be difficult to do many things. Like, we can't dig a well even though we've got, 2 acres, and the water that is in our watershed here, when tested, is still, the springs are some of the best water you can get, really.
But you're not allowed to drink it.
No.
Yeah.
We have to get the chlorinated town water pumped in way up our driveway, and then we have to do all the filtering that we do.
Mm-hmm. Does UNESCO or some government body come around and inspect you on a fairly regular basis?
No, I mean, it's not at that level, but I mean, there's tons of bylaws in building and all sorts of different things. Mm-hmm. But we've never interfaced directly with any agency. And one thing that's nice being in the valley is we're not surrounded by farms. We moved here about 10 years ago from this little town that I grew up in from about the age of 12 and went to high school. And it was surrounded by mega farms on all sides. If anyone knows anything about glyphosate and other various things they spray on everything, it felt pretty hazardous, Mm-hmm. It's nice to be down here, but of course there's always something. Like, this is an apple growing region, and they spray the apples like crazy. Yeah, it's amazing. We have friends that live not far away on this beautiful farm, but there's an apple orchard on one or two sides of their farm. I think they're surrounded by them too. And they get warnings to shut their windows and keep everybody inside. And they've got little kids and little children, and they get a warning, I think like the day before, to close your windows and stay inside because we're going to be spraying. And then I suppose magically a few hours later it's all okay and you can come out.
Right. I'll just give a little bit of background here real quick. David is an artist, a painter, a really good painter, and has made his living that way for a number of years. And he is married to Sarah, who made her living as a photographer for a long time, and she has switched gears in the last couple of years and studied herbal medicine and has begun making a lot of different wonderful sounding herbal remedies for this, that, and the other, and I'm about to try one out for sleep problems. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they have 3 children. Did I get the overall lay of the land there?
Yeah, pretty much. The children are in a forest school, which is an incredible concept that, as far as I know, didn't exist when I was a child. And so they spend as much time as they possibly can outside.
Oh, neat.
Learning, all the standard subjects, but with a natural bent applied. Mm-hmm. So they'll do things like trail building or shelter building or studying, salmon when they spawn, or applied science when the leaves change or whatever it might be. So it's pretty incredible. It's like a private school, and we've got some help with a bursary and stuff. And so we feel really, really lucky to have them in that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, my son's 11 and he's learning leadership. Mm-hmm. I can't think of a public school that teaches leadership.
No, in fact, the little boys are supposed to have that drummed out of them.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
I just happen to have Bertrand Russell's 1951 book. I think it's 51, mm-hmm. The Impact of Science on Society, literally open in front of me, and something that I underlined like years ago. If I may.
You may. I have to say that this is completely spontaneous. We did not discuss.
We did not. I had these books here because I thought, in our discussion, maybe we'd talk about certain things, but this is just one of those crazy couple of pages in this book that...
Oh, read it, please, yes.
I first heard Alan read this probably 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. He says, Fichte, I guess that was, I don't know the guy's first name. Anyways, okay. It is to be expected that advances in physiology and psychology will give governments more control over individual mentality than they now have, even in totalitarian countries. Fichte laid it down that education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils have left school, they shall be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished.
Yeah. Well, so, no wonder he was a hero, right? No wonder Fichte was a hero. He was German, and he lived in the 1700s, and I am going to look him up right now here. This is very interesting here. Now, I just learned this second. It said Fichte was also the originator of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, an idea that is often erroneously attributed to Hegel.
Hegel. Isn't that funny?
Yeah. So
Hegel must have come later then and played on that, I guess. With
yes.
The dialectic.
That is an interesting little nugget there that we just learned. But yeah, so that is the purpose of education, and you and your wife decided right from the very beginning that you were going to do things differently, and you're pleased so far. Yeah,
and in large part, I have to say, not solely due to Alan, but we read John Taylor Gatto a lot, which was another person that Alan had talked about years ago. Mm-hmm. When we educated ourselves a little bit, we both agreed that there was just no way that we would repeat what had been done to us in the public school system. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're trucking along, and luckily we have amazing children. They're eager and creative and bright and full of energy, and are great at self-directing and exploring their interests, and we just support them in that, And of course we do math and English and all this stuff. But now the forest school is great too. They're really rounding things out and exposing them to things that honestly we don't really have tons of time to. I mean, we live basically in nature. We're in a tiny little town, but we're off the main street, and we've got 2 acres that back up into acres and acres and acres of amazing hiking. And so they've always spent a lot of time outside. So it's a kind of a great meeting of the two things.
It's a bit idyllic.
It is.
Before you landed there, I just have had the opportunity to be getting to know you, although I have read a few of your emails over the years, and so I've watched you go through some things like, well, even having the children to start with, but for a while you and your wife ran a cafe, and you were doing some interesting things there. I'd love it if you just really quickly talk on the potato farming and the cafe and like your documentary night.
Yeah, it was a relatively short-lived experiment in a co-op. There were 8 of us that ran it together, and it was funded by somebody else who had moved to town and agreed to fund it. And we did pretty well. I mean, we always said if every day was as busy as a Saturday and Sunday brunch, we would have been off to the races. But then, Monday through Thursday just slayed us. Mm-hmm. Just not enough traffic. But in any case, it was a great little time in our lives for a while. And yeah, we had a lot of local produce and music nights that I would cook like a limited bistro style menu for. Those were amazing nights. And then, yeah, I started doing documentary film nights, but that was kind of short lived because a lot of people came to those evenings, I think, wanting to hear their own pre-decided upon conclusions, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And I also came up against some pretty serious kind of new age thinking where I'd show a hard-hitting documentary about something that, let's say, the disappearing male. Some of them were things that Alan had recommended years ago too. Afterwards, there'd be this kind of almost invariably like it's so negative. We need to hear, positive things, and, you can't just focus on the negative. And, my position has always been like I'm almost at a hopeful anonymous meeting, sort of like, hi, my name is David. I'm a short-term pessimist, long-term optimist. The logic is apparent to me that you need to know how bad things are. You need the lay of the land before you can properly respond with a positive solution, you know what I mean? Uh-huh. And so, yeah, I fully admit that it wasn't like come and leave with a happy feeling night, it was come and challenge your perceptions and take a peek into, how the world really works a little bit. And so, yeah, that was a little frustrating.
Well, it's funny there too, because we laugh about people who are woke and need, the youngsters who need their safe spaces at the university or something triggers them. But what you're talking about is adults who have a very similar attitude, they've got to create a safe space in their mind, and the New Age is perfect for that.
Yeah, and some of these were like retired adults.
Ugh.
So they were getting woke before woke broke.
Yeah.
But that's been pretty obvious for a long time that, cognitive dissonance rules, right?
Yes.
People don't really want to switch up their thinking too seriously. And I mean, as Alan used to say often, if they really took in this information, thinking of themselves as moral people with ideas, or ideals rather, they would have to change something.
Yes.
And that's pretty daunting. To walk it, you talk it, is a big challenge.
It is true. I mean, he said that, and I know you'll remember this in the Cutting Through books, but he's got that place where it's sucker your it-y,
Yeah.
And that is it. Is that when you really are able to face what is going on, then what you're faced with is yourself in the mirror. You're it. You
Yeah.
are your own champion. There is no one who's coming to the rescue. There's not a great awakening where everybody is going to say, aha, now we understand what's going on. And I regularly hear from people who say, oh yeah, but a lot more people are waking up. And Alan would say, that's not waking up, that's reacting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think to a degree, some of that is happening.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say to a limited degree. My wife and I, differ on this slightly. She's much more, let's say, positively inclined.
That's a female characteristic too.
Yeah, and she does not in any way at all deny the darkest aspects of this agenda that we're living through. But she chooses consciously, for her own sort of ability to get up and get at it in the day, just to more focus on the hopeful aspects. Like I said, long-term optimist, short-term pessimist.
I like that. Well, I should mention here too for listeners that this talk, I believe, it has a dual function, because it can be one of those sounds of nature recordings. You've got the birds going on here, and I have a very loud thunderstorm in the background, which is going to come through. So.
We just need some whale song.
Yeah, it'll be the unlikely combination of birds chirping away against a thunderstorm.
I was just thinking earlier today, just thinking of birdsong, how much less there is now.
Yes.
I remember when I was a teenager, after some particularly wild field party, trying to get some sleep on a Sunday morning, and the birds were literally, not deafening, but like a true cacophony. It's just not to that degree anymore. One amazing thing, though, there's a pond in the property next to us, and in the spring, the what they call peepers, mm-hmm. tiny frogs, that is an amazing cacophony. It's I fall asleep to that every night in the spring. I've got pretty severe tinnitus from stupidly shooting a hunting rifle in high school. And so I'm really thankful for those sounds of nature that with the windows open I can just focus on. That sort of,
I was thinking that it might have been from your music days.
Well, those are still going, and I guess at this point, I don't know how much more damage I could do to my ears than I did then.
Since we just mentioned the music, you've sent me some great songs that you've recorded in the last 2 or 3 years, and there's some that from the last 3 years, you call it your angry period.
the
angry songs.
flying, no demand. Steps above my heavy hand. There's nothing public, no more trials. Now we're left with empty miles. And goodbye, good luck. Get well soon. Goodbye, good luck. Goodbye, good luck. Get well soon. Goodbye, good luck. Goodbye, good luck. Get well soon. Goodbye, good luck. Goodbye, good luck. Get well soon. Goodbye, good luck. Goodbye. Good luck.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to have a friend who's a music producer and is a true musical genius and prodigy, and who happens to really like my art. And so as gifts to his wife, he gets paintings, and he comes up to my studio here, and we record kind of guerrilla fashion for like 10 days or something at a time. And so we've done that twice now, and it's pretty amazing. But yeah, the songs that are on the YouTube channel I sent you are very, very much a reaction to the lockdown and to what was going on, and they're not subtle lyrically, you know. Mm-hmm. They're dare I say, like, verging on, if not totally engaging in sloganeering, you know.
Mm-hmm. We'll plug some of those in, and you sent also one that's pre-mixed, the producer, and I quite like that one too, so we'll highlight a little bit of that.
Hard to keep the love in your heart in a fight that you did not start. You've got no right to place yourself apart. When the crowd moves in one direction, is it a dream that you could stand your ground? When it's backwards and it's upside down, you summon all the strength you found. When the crowd moves in one direction, you know it's hurt behavior. It's hurt behavior. It's hurt behavior. When the masses move, can you stand still when the masses move? Just wait and see where they're moving to. It's not likely that it's somewhere new. When the crowd moves in one direction, you know it's hurt behavior. It's hurt behavior. It's hurt behavior. When the masses move,
Thanks.
Maybe at this moment you can take just a few minutes to talk about what you were involved in when you were a little bit younger, the Drawnonward group.
Oh yeah, it was kind of a surreal, wonderful happenstance that happened to me and a bunch of friends. We were in art school together. We were at the Ontario College of Art together. We lived together in various different, what's the word? Concatenations? Is that the word? Anyways. And then about a year after we were all graduated, a couple of the guys started doing plein air painting, which is just going out into nature and painting what you see. We happened to get some funding offered to us from Scotia Capital Markets, the Bank of Nova Scotia's investment wing, and so they could write off funding the arts. We just hit it so lucky, and we had a couple trips funded, and we put on some shows, and it really took off. And so from about 96 till maybe 2010 or 12, we were working together and traveling together. We pooled our own money and bought a school bus and renovated it, painted it green, and put our logo Drawnonward on it, and did some incredible trips across Canada. A friend of ours was a filmmaker, and he came along with his brother who was doing sound for him on our trip to Newfoundland, which was an amazing, amazing experience. We got quite a bit of media attention for a while, newspapers, magazines, radio, TV, and this documentary, I think, occasionally is still played on Canadian television. And we'd hear from young art students that their art teacher had played it in their class and it had inspired them. And so, yeah, we really had a truly fortunate ride for a while. Yeah, it was amazing.
What were some of the educational highlights, the things that you learned from this experience, which lasted actually quite a few years? I didn't realize it was such a long period of your life.
Yeah, it waned when we all had children and stopped going on, month or 2 month long trips into the bush. But we had some incredible experiences, like snowshoeing into a remote cabin up near Sault Ste. Marie and spending a month in this tiny cabin in the winter and painting every day and just having about as good a time as young men in their 20s can have in the woods. But one of the most amazing the trip to Newfoundland was pretty revelatory in a bunch of different ways. Spending some time in a culture. I don't know if you know much about Newfoundland, but it's a really, really wonderful island.
I don't know.
There's something about the isolation of being on an island that has bred this intense friendliness in Newfoundland. They're the most hospitable people on the planet. We just had some hilarious times there. I'd say that probably the most profound experience for a lot of us was spending a lot of time in the Arctic. Yeah. In the Inuit communities and making some friends up there, some long-lasting relationships there. Anybody who knows anything about what happened to First Nations people and culture over the past several hundred years in North America, it's hard to describe the duality of life up there, The cultural genocide was nearly, I have to say, complete and in my opinion, ongoing. So there's a lot of sadness, but again, like Newfoundlanders, the Inuit are amazingly hospitable. For the most part, just incredibly friendly and welcoming and hilarious, love to laugh. And so it was amazing to see people living wonderful lives in spite and despite of what has happened to their culture.
I don't know really anything about them, but I'm curious. A question comes to mind. You said that they're living wonderful lives despite what's happened.
Well, that not en masse, I wouldn't say. There's a lot of poverty and misery and drug abuse and familial abuse and alcoholism and the problems that were foisted upon them. There are no magical solutions to when, in my opinion, at least, when a culture's the carpet is ripped out from under their feet again and again and again. It's tragic. But when I say that, people living great lives, there are people who are, transcending and trying to improve and uplift the youth. I think the youth suicide rate in the Arctic regions, and probably not just in Canada, are among the highest in the world, if not the highest in the world.
Really?
So, every family that you would meet, or pretty much anybody you would talk to up there, they've had family members who have committed suicide, and largely very young teenagers. So when I say duality, it is a profound duality, and so lots to learn for the happy-go-lucky Western landscape painter, just going up there and being thrown into a world that we didn't know much about, and being welcomed.
It's interesting. We can touch just a little bit on your family background, but what it makes me think when you're talking about this is the kind of attack and trauma that they've intentionally done on Indigenous people or tribal people, and by tribal people I'll extend it out to Scots, Ireland.
Sure.
That it isn't just First Nations people in North America. There's and damage that you can see in Africa, etc.
Yep.
But you, as what you'd call a Westerner there in Canada, and myself, we've grown up in a more the kind of the melting pot idea. You have a lot of different heritage in your family line, as do I, but
Yeah.
what that does is it removes us a step or two from a sense of real tribe.
Yeah, absolutely. And the difference in the family unit on average is really apparent. I often think about, I have a cousin living in India, and generations still live together. Mm-hmm. They take care of their parents and their grandparents, and yeah, boy, have we ever lost that here, eh?
I see the worst of us and I feel nothing. I'm on the team and I'll play my part. I'm going forward with another direction now. I'll make it through with my artificial heart. My artificial heart. I stand by while we erase the past. I know it's over before we start. The train left the station and it's moving faster now. I'm on board with my artificial heart. My artificial heart. It's my heart. My artificial heart.
We really have, it is a sad thing. Obviously, every Canadian and every American, just like the people who would say, oh, I'm just a Westerner from whatever country you name in Europe, we're all suffering. You can look in any country at the drug abuse, the homelessness, because it's an all-out attack. But what really, where the pain is just palpable is with places like what you're describing, this tribal, where the tribe was everything. And I find similar things amongst, say, the Highlanders in Scotland. I've never been there, but I communicate with people who still live there, and what it is this intergenerational open sore. It's a wound that never heals.
Yeah. We, as a group, Drawnonward, the artists, we got the chance to spend a couple weeks in the Highlands of Scotland painting. The landscapes are dotted with these abandoned crofts.
Croft is a small farm holding.
Yeah. I just side note. I as you know, I sent Alan one of the paintings I did in Scotland, and
yes,
he said it reminded him of his childhood. Yeah, after the Highland clearances, and I fully agree. It's the same kind of war, on culture and tradition, and the forcing into sameness or orthodoxy, So yeah, that was another. I kind of forgot about that, but that was another profound sort of learning experience, learning about the clearances, and something I'm sure Alan knew a lot about.
Yes. Well, you have an interesting family background too, in that your mother was Finnish, and that's why you know how to say sauna.
Sauna, yeah.
Sauna.
Yeah, I'm half Finnish.
Ah.
And was there when I was 7 and remember it very fondly. And again, the family unit when I was there seemed to be pretty strong. Like, I remember I was 7 years old, and there was this midsummer night bonfire that they would do. They would build a huge fire on a raft and float it out into the middle of the lake. And of course, because you're up north in the summer, you can be awake at 1 or 2 in the morning, and it's like just the beginning of a sunset. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that seemed really magical. Just these families gathering, and there were so many cousins, and all the generations saunaing together, grandmothers, grandfathers, and parents and grandchildren, like 3 generations, so down to earth, and everybody jumping in the lake and drinking a cold beer and having some salty sausage with mustard afterwards. Sauna makara is the sausage. So yeah, that's why I as soon as we moved to where we could build one, it was a dream of mine to build our own sauna. So we don't have a pond. We just dump buckets over our heads, but it's an amazing thing. And I have to say, through the lockdown, I was sauning like 3 nights a week and just sweating it out. And it's a great place to be alone with your thoughts, incredibly healthy as well. So that's definitely a gift from my Finnish side.
Oh, that sounds so nice.
It is, yeah. And it's a place where, we go out there, my wife and I and the 3 kids. There's no electricity, it's like a few hundred feet from the house, and we're just in there together, sweating and talking, and it's like some of the best just family time you can get,
Mm-hmm.
Very old-fashioned, which I'll take. Thank you very much.
So then on your father's side, we just get this in really quickly because your mother sounded so interesting to me. An amazing cook, a real community presence. You said she had this just mothering quality. Everybody loved her.
Yep. She would listen like nobody else. That's what everybody remembered, that she would give you her whole attention. And all my friends loved her. When I run into people that knew her, it's still such a warm feeling that they have about her and reminiscing about her. And
that's nice.
Yeah.
And then your father actually also had an interesting background. Was quite a good musician.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was born in the Bronx. My grandfather was Jewish, not religious. He was
had come over from Russia.
His parents came over.
Oh, his parents. Okay,
yeah.
All right.
So my father's grandparents.
Okay.
came over from Russia in the late 1800s, having, run away from the pogroms. And so, yeah, my father didn't grow up even remotely religious. They were, I guess, what you'd call culturally Jewish. But my grandmother on my dad's side was Pennsylvania Deutsch, so not Jewish at all. But she made the best gefilte fish, as I always say. And so then they moved to Boston and then to Montreal, where he went to high school, and then finally to Toronto. Yeah, he had an interesting life. He was in business, but had wanted to be in music. Like when he was 22, he hitchhiked to New York City with his guitar and ended up living with musicians who were in a band called the Mugwumps, who later went on to be the Mamas and the Papas and Lovin' Spoonful.
Neat.
He knew Mama Cass, and Zolianovsky from the Lovin' Spoonful taught him a lot of guitar. And he just slept on their couch one summer in New York City and went to all the folk clubs and, just had some amazing experiences, I guess. And then came back to Toronto and went to university where he met my mom. And then I think it was really driven into him that he needed to make money, because my grandfather was a salesman. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Tin Men, the Barry Levinson movie Tin Men.
Yes, I have, years ago when it was first out.
Yeah, so my dad basically described my grandfather and his uncles as, the Tin Men guys. Like, they would sell aluminum siding or whatever it was, and some of them even ran scams approximating the famous Time magazine scam.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, where they would come and say, Time magazine wants to do, and they'll feature your house as a
yes, of course,
of putting siding on it. And my dad always said that my grandfather was one of the brothers who was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And he was legit and made his money legitimately. But, they were an interesting bunch of guys. They would, at family reunions, they'd do magic tricks and pull a coin out from under your ear or whatever. Yeah, where was I going with?
You were talking about the pressure that your dad had to make money and partly because coming from a family where that was important and they were all out selling and making a living and didn't understand why he was a musician.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think they understood, but the pressure was on, and I don't know how overt it was. But yeah, he got his degree in economics and taught for a while and went through God knows how many careers selling different things, until he found his niche as a copywriter in the late 80s and 90s, and that was kind of where he stayed. But he always played, and he died just before Alan died, actually.
I remember that. That's hard.
Yeah, and so he was with cancer and a walker, still going to open mic nights and playing a song or two if he could muster the energy. So he loved playing songs.
Amazing.
Yeah. And even took some guitar lessons, at 79, and ended up being able to play even better than he could before.
Wow.
But he taught me, basic Travis picking on the guitar when I was like 14. Mm-hmm. And so my brother and I picked all that up from him, and we had, I've had a couple bands, and my brother was in a band that toured the States and Canada for years, and was nominated for Juno, and they used to pack the bars. So yeah, we both really, really picked that up from him for sure.
That's fun.
And our family Christmases and gatherings would be, my aunt plays too. She's a professional musician, and so just amazing campfire nights of harmonies and folk songs.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you've had a lot of wonderful experiences in your life, and you've gotten to travel all over your big and beautiful country and other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But did you want to share a little bit about your journey towards seeing reality as it is?
Yeah, sure. My parents were, well, my mother, when she came over as a teenager to go to school in Texas, yeah, I think at like 16 or something, she started working with the Freedom Riders. So she would, go on a bus with a black person and sit beside them and ride with them. And so, they were very much leftists, and very much for, they were totally anti-racist and totally anti-homophobic. And I remember we lived in the beaches in Toronto when I was a kid, and that was a very much or at least it seemed to me, a very post-60s kind of community of, varying degrees of ex-hippies. And the streets would just be lined with NDP signs, For anyone that doesn't know, that's in Canadian politics, the New Democratic Party, who are traditionally thought of as left of the Liberals and, for the working class. And so I grew up in that kind of environment thinking that, that was kind of the ultimate right way to go, And I remember in the 90s when, I don't know if you remember Bob Ray. Anyways,
yes.
he got to be premier and seemingly immediately got into bed with big business, big surprise. And so that was one of the first sort of veins of disillusionment I remember in the family. And I guess I'd always been aware of, having kind of idolized 60s musicians and 60s music and 70s music. From all of that, I kind of gleaned that, very basically, like, war, bad, protest song, good. So I had a vague sense that, somehow the military-industrial complex, although I don't think many people were calling it that at the time, except maybe in more radical communities that I wasn't aware of. And it wasn't until 9/11, as with for so many people, that my jaw kind of dropped, and it was a bell that you couldn't unring, or I couldn't unring. And it was shortly after that I found Alan and his work, and immediately recognized something so grounded and way deeper than any analysis I'd ever heard. So I found him at the right time. Yeah, he became a real teacher, I would say. And so that was kind of my progression, from a traditional leftist. I marched in the first Earth Day and drew cool murals all over the streets of Toronto, and just, happy-go-lucky. But yeah, I do remember that moment of Bob Ray and big business, kind of that combination where several members of my family, my extended family too, were just so kind of disillusioned by that. I seem to be really the only one until maybe, a couple of years ago, honestly, that have, sought a deeper and more complex model of reality than what's offered in the media. So that's been interesting too in the family, to see a few people sort of getting their antenna higher than they used to be. But I really do have to credit Alan's work with a huge portion of my my overall awakening. And to this day, I've listened to endless different podcasts and hosts and thinkers and researchers and scholars and academics, and Alan stands still so far above the crowd in so many different ways. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really is. I never cease to be amazed at how profound. The depth and the breadth of his knowledge just floors me still, always.
Yeah, I always come back to it for a good grounding and like a little sort of tap on the shoulder or whatever, just to like a reminder to not buy in to nearly anything really. And it's funny you mentioned the that you're your own savior. That sentiment, I just said that to my son yesterday. I was trying to explain Hollywood movies and how the Pentagon is so intimately involved with so many different action movies. And so I impart, often little bits of advice that Alan would give to sort of, you can watch them, but always keep a portion of your mind thinking, like, what are they trying to make me think? Or how are they trying to alter my perception in what way, and to not give yourself totally over to it, to be more of an observer. So hopefully, with repeated repetitions of that idea, might be able to lessen the effect of that very same propaganda.
Hopefully, you can train yourself to have a guard up so that you are able to see something on different levels simultaneously, and you can enjoy it. You can, you can be scared by it or laugh at it or whatever, that feeling is that obviously they're trying to generate, but there is a portion of your brain that has elevated itself up and says, okay, these are the messages that I'm supposed to be getting,
I think I'm there, There's almost nothing that I watch without this kind of question mark floating over my head. Mm-hmm. And I'm a huge film fan. I love art in whatever form it can come in, except performance art. I just never had some uncomfortable experiences in art college with performance art.
Do you have a list of favorite movies that, for whatever reason, because they, it's got a good message, or it tells you a lot about the programming, or?
Well, I would be going over repeated ground that Alan has gone over again and again, I'm sure. One of my, aside from any programming or what it might be about, I find The Exorcist to be one of those movies that just is crafted impeccably.
Mm-hmm. Alan, he loved that movie. I must have seen The Exorcist with him a good 4 or 5 times.
Oh, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
It's an incredible movie. And the book is, I read it in a day. I honestly, it barely put it down, like, just to eat. Incredible book as well. Yeah, a lot of the old favorites, like The Godfather is another. You don't get a movie that rich anymore, even the palette. Mm-hmm. And of course that has a lot to say about a lot of things. You can read into it in a bunch of different ways. But yeah, I don't know, so many. I took a film analysis course when I was at art college, and I loved this Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn movie, Bringing Up Baby.
Oh, yes.
It's just like good old-fashioned, silly, kind of feel-good comedy.
Yeah. Did you ever see the movie that they were both in called The Philadelphia Story?
Yeah, I think I watched that with my dad a long time ago. I'll have to revisit.
Oh, you'll have to revisit that because the dialogue is just, it's excellent. Now, if you're watching it with the let's pay attention to programming, then there are a lot of messages in there. You've got feminism, and we'll just call it the flexibility of relationships,
Right.
So there's definitely plenty of messages to beware of there, but it was certainly good writing.
Okay, I'll revisit that for sure. And then, there's movies that Alan pointed out, like Gattaca, or the John Hurt 1984 version. I thought was excellent. Not surprisingly, that's a book I've read again and again.
Yeah, that version of the movie is really quite good too. The book is excellent. That Brave New World and 1984, that's just required reading and viewing. You must see, must read, must see.
And Animal Farm too.
Animal Farm is great. The book, you can read the book in an hour or an hour and a half. And
I read it out loud to the children like last year.
There's no, even people who don't like to read, there's no excuse not to read that one. It's a very slim little volume, and he didn't have an extra word in there. It's quite lean and mean.
Yeah, it just flies along. It's so well written. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't think of any movie in particular that stands out, and just it's not in my head at the moment.
One thing that you know how Alan used to say, oh, there's so many different ways, there's 1,000 ways that culture could have gone or society could have gone, but you're not supposed to know that, you're not supposed to think about that.
Yeah, didn't Lennon say that?
Yes, and he would quote that regularly.
Yep, one of the greatest hits, right?
Yep, and I think it's the same thing with movies. You know, he said, when the film industry, whether it's Hollywood or a British film or a foreign, German film, whatever, when they want to, they can really put out something with amazing, lofty values that's moral, that makes you feel good or makes you think. Just unfortunately, they really don't want to do that.
No, it's we have family movie night, and I try and there are certain movies that the kids just want to see, the children just want to see. I hate saying kids, it comes up, but again, another thing that Alan said often is, the psycholinguistics of words like kid, baby, goat. Mm-hmm. I try and show some older movies to get them out of that high editing rate, Mm-hmm. That fast-paced, adrenaline pumping kind of short attention span kind of movie into older movies from the 50s and 60s. And it's amazing, like playing Chitty Chitty Bang Bang for them or something.
Oh, love that.
Yeah, just laughing.
Alan loved that movie too.
That's great. I love it.
Have you ever seen The Secret of Rowan Inish?
Oh, my children love that movie.
See, that would be one that Alan and I watched that together a few times, and that was one I remember him saying after we watched that. You see, when they want to, they can turn out a beautiful movie. Yeah, it can happen. And again, I'd forget a lot of the titles, but during art college, there was this reel with some friends of mine and I. There was something called like the art house circuit in Toronto, mm-hmm. and in I guess most big cities. And you could go to a few theaters that would either play old movies or European kind of art house cinema, and the contrast is so huge between some 90s Hollywood blockbuster and some 90s small European art house movie. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's harder to see them now, though, with the conglomerations that we get. Oh, sure. You can turn on the television if you happen to have access to, 500 channels, and you'll have trouble finding something that you want to watch.
Yeah. My wife and I were, like I told you about, we were in New York a couple of weeks ago for 5 days, and we don't have TV. We just watch. We get something from the internet or a DVD or whatever. So we don't my children don't see commercials.
Ah.
And I haven't years. I haven't had TV for 20 years in any place I've lived. And so in the hotel room in New York, it was just, it's like anytime I'm in a hotel, you sort of flake out and turn the TV on and start flicking channels. And if you do find something that you're enjoying, it's not more than a few minutes before there's, 5 or 7 minutes of commercials.
Uh-huh.
And
the commercials nowadays are highly weaponized.
Oh, and mostly pharmaceutical.
Yeah, yeah.
My wife and I were laughing. Every commercial would end with, may cause death.
Yeah.
You may bleed from your eyeballs and your toes may explode. And
or irritable bowel syndrome,
Yeah. Are you not sleeping? Why don't you try this and experience this huge range of side effects that may include death? But then they show people walking through a flowery field at the end, holding hands with their children, and
so it's all good.
Try a Vitra or whatever. So that was amazing. Not having seen commercials in a long time, it was pretty jaw-dropping.
That's funny. We should save a little bit of time because I'll plug in music that you sent, but before we wrap it up, because believe it or not, we've been going over an hour. But I just want to give you the opportunity to talk about something that you started the conversation with the burning desire to say, and you haven't said it yet.
Well, it's funny, in the knowing that we were going to do this talk, I made a whole bunch of notes, and I haven't even looked at them. But one thing that's written in the biggest lettering of all is with an exclamation point is Alan's Christmas songs. And so for anybody who's listening and hasn't heard, well, I should explain, or you can, Alan used to do on Christmas, he would get out his classical guitar and just freestyle a composition. He was improvising, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
They're just, my wife and I, for years, every Christmas, when, since we've had children, when the children are in bed and we're alone, get the laptop and lie in bed, and we would just quietly listen to his musical offering. And they were really moving and a real gift. That was the sense I got, that he was really trying to give you something in that,
Yes, he loved to do that. And I think maybe improvising is not the best word, because he might if he had time, he might get the guitar out a day or 2 or 3 before Christmas and just pluck at it, pick at it. But I would never hear that melody that ultimately got recorded on Christmas Day then. He was just warming up. And then he would play it and record it. And I'd say, oh my goodness. And he said, well, that has been in my head. So I think more than improvising, he actually had the full melody, pretty much start to finish, in his head. Because once he put it down on Christmas Day, he could play it again note for note the next day or a year later. And one other thing I'll say, too, about his Christmas compositions is that one year he recorded something, I don't remember which one off the top of my head, but I said, oh, that sounds like, and I referenced back another song. And he said, yeah, I've got a theme in my head. And I said, for 3 years? But he did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the apparent, or his mastery of the guitar fretboard was apparent in those compositions, because I played one once for a classically trained friend of mine, who went to music school and, teaches music and everything. And I said, just listen to this and tell me what you think. And he was blown away by you know, as much by the playing as by the emotion that was actually contained in it. You know,
Yeah.
it's hard to project emotion. You know, I'm a very basic musician. I don't know any theory. I just sort of write 3-chord kind of pop songs. But yeah, I just always really admired those and enjoyed them, and still do. I've gone back and listened to them several times.
Oh, that's neat.
I'm just very grateful to have found Alan's work, and I supported him through the years, bought several of the books and handed them out, and I'm about due to order another one, I think. So
great. Well, I thank you for taking the time and doing this, and I've had a fun time recording this with you. And I think because I too took a pile of notes, you've got a pile of notes, and what that tells me is that we will do this again, and next time we'll be all warmed up and we can go to our stack of notes.
I'd love to do that. It's a real pleasure talking to you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for your time and your insights and your life. Really interesting.
Well, I'd also like to thank you for, being invisibly behind the scenes for so long, and for, keeping up what you're doing. I've really enjoyed listening to the interviews you've done, and I love that you're putting up images to the videos. I assume some of the books that you show are from Alan's collection, and I love seeing that. So anyways, you're doing an amazing job, and I'm just grateful you're still doing it.
Well, to me, Alan would say it's a must-be, and that's how I feel about this. It's a must-be. His work was life-changing for me, and being with him was profoundly life-changing, and I feel that was a gift for which I am eternally grateful. And
yeah, well, me too. And though I never actually spoke to him, I definitely considered him a teacher, but he was a friend I never met.
A lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks to the listeners for sharing another chunk of time with me and David. And I will be back next week. And I will just mention that next week I have already arranged to be speaking again with Darren from South Africa, and we have a specific topic which I shall leave as a surprise, but we're going to cover something from South Africa in quite a bit of depth. So that will be June the 22nd, and I will look forward to that. Thank you.
I look forward to it too. Thank you.
All right. Take care, and good night, everybody.
I've got something that the world didn't give me, and the world cannot take it away. And I've got something that the world